I started collecting comic books again, and really the Spider-Man, Hulk, and the Fantastic Four stuff. I was living in California. I used to ride my bike up to Our Drugs. It's a drugstore chain in California. I first started buying comic books at Owl Drugs in Los Angeles, and Nolan and I are here in front of the Hollywood sign, right, Nolan? Yeah. And I would sit on the curb with a grape knee-high and read these books and fold them in my back pocket right around my bike. And that was good times. That was really fun. My mom, just after my dad died, had moved to Oregon, and I remained in California for several years. And then a few years later, I again saw my brother and sister and my mother in Oregon. They moved to a small town called Junction City, Oregon, with just a little over, I think, 1,000 people at the time. And so there weren't a lot of us in town. There were no comic book stores. I don't know if obviously it's the right word, but there were no comic book stores at all in that area. This old building, constructed in 1937, is the high school I went to in Junction City, Oregon. Now, if you're going to start collecting Spider-Man comics, the best time to do it is summer of 1962, right? But if you're going to do it another time, a good time to do it is the early 80s. Just before the Roger Stern run, the Hobgoblin came out, John Romita Jr. was drawing, Black Cat came back, Mary Jane came back, Black Cat was there, Mary Jane came back, Black Suit, Craven's Last Hunt, all these things had a huge impact on me. Yeah, collecting comics in the 80s was really the best, and it's no wonder that a lot of the cinematic universe stories are trying to recapture some of what we saw or what we read back then. The things that come to mind are like the Walt Simonson Thor, the Frank Miller Daredevil, the late 70s, early 80s Claremont X-Men, the Roger Stern Spider-Man stories were really some of the best stories. Oh my God, there's a dog chasing these cows out here. Hold on. I don't know if you can see that way out here in the distance, but there's a herding dog. He's out here going after these cows. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt our story there, but that was kind of neat. Yeah, there were good stories back then. The excitement was palpable. Video games were not great at the time. They were okay. There were some fun games, but this sort of anticipation of these stories coming out, something we really wanted to read, and the change in the stories. They weren't sort of dumb like Monster of the Week stuff anymore. So things were exciting and happening and fun. We didn't have a lot of other entertainment choices, and it was a great experience. I actually was so naive that I told my counselor at high school that I wanted to go to Empire State University, where Peter Parker went to New York, not realizing that's a fictional university. So that was a bit hilarious on my part. But then began the mad hunt to not just fix up books, of course, but to get them, and we started to realize that good condition was better. When you start buying them, you start to realize you pay more for ones in good condition. Sorry, I'm out of breath. It's 8,000 feet here in Ethiopia. It's hard to breathe a little bit. But you start to realize that the better condition ones are worth more, so why not take one that's not as good a condition and make it better? Right? I started doing that. And this is a time when there's no eBay, right? There's no way to get these things except your local comic book store, or once yearly at the Red Lion break room or ballroom in the town nearby. You could go to a comic book convention and hope to God they have the ones you want. So, and you can negotiate for them. So that began that quest, and that quest, was hardest to get Amazing Spider-Man #1, and of course Amazing Fantasy 15, which we all covet. At the time, I had a chance to buy an Amazing Spider-Man #1 for $290, an impossibly large sum for me at that time, and it seemed like I would never get it. And I'm glad I started back then, because it probably would be impossible now. And I have to tell you that when I was a kid, if you had collected comic books when I was young, it was a butt-kicking event. Like, people didn't, it wasn't cool like it is now cool to actually collect comic books. It was shameful, in fact, for anyone over the age of 10 to be collecting comic books. And so that was why it was a little different, but they were getting harder and edgier, and I really liked it. So what was collecting comics like in the 80s? I got comic books in the mail, but I also rode my bike to a nearby town, Eugene, Oregon, about 22 to 24 miles away with my buddy, my friend, his name's Jeff. And we used to ride out there and stop and get water from hoses along the way, we could have taken a bus, but it was saving 75 cents so we could get one more comic book. And we were, apologies. Yep. All right, this is the friend, Jeff, that I used to ride my bike with to the comic book store. We used to ride from this street, and we'll show you the path and where that comic book store is. So this is the comic book store. The front used to be right here, and it used to be called Emerald City Comics. Here's Nolan. Say hi, Nolan.
Hello.
And this is the front of my old comic book store. It's now a Jersey Mike Subs, and we used to walk right up these stairs, and now it's locked, but we used to walk right up here, and we used to go inside there. And this is the entrance that we used to go ride our bikes to right here. And that's it. And I'll show you the stairs. Does it look familiar, Jeff? This is where you sit. There's a book deposit, look. And then over here, see, this is the smell. It used to smell like comic books when you came in here. Actually, it still smells like comic books. And then here's the book lift. So you used to be able to put books, the bookstore, or comic books in here to get them upstairs. There was a little elevator that would take your comic books upstairs. And I used to run in this door like as fast as I could, right? And we used to run stairs, and then we used to go straight up to the comic book store, which is, I don't think we can get in there now. Well, there used to be stairs right here. You used to come around this corner. Let's see, it says employees only, but we can probably get in there.
There's a little pocket stairs.
Oh, we can't get in there. But you could get up there and go to, that's how we got to the comic book store. But yeah, it still kind of smells like comic books, actually, a little bit. And I remember as I got better at science, and I wanted to be a scientist, still in high school now, I really wanted to turn some attention to these books. Like, what can I do to trade some of these old junky books I have a lot of to get the very few books I wanted? And that came in the form of comic book convention. So I got my new comics in the mail and at my LCS, and I got old comics at the LCS too, but they had pretty limited books, and the same ones kept showing up. And we used to get these small checklist cards that you could write the name of the title at the top, and you could check off which comics you had, and you would take that with you, and you'd know which ones you had to get, because again, we couldn't read most of these books without buying them. There were the odd Marvel tales and odd reprint, but if you wanted to know the story, that's what you had to do. And I was at the time collecting the Silvermane books of Spider-Man, and I think Spider-Man was in the 220s or 230s at this time. My card only went up to 200, so I had a second card that had like the first 30 issues of Spider-Man highlighted, but of course I had all of those, but I just wanted to make sure I had my little set complete. Yeah, and we would wait for conventions or trading with our friends. That was all we had, really. There were these catalogs that would come in the mail, or you could see these ads in the back of a comic book where you could send in and buy a book sight unseen, but the prices seemed really high for those books at the time. So conventions is where it was for us. We were really really looking for comic book conventions, which were once a year, usually in a Red Lion in like banquet hall, or occasionally at the local fairgrounds. For as far as getting to older comic books, we went to the LCS. We had a limited stock, and there were a lot of the same issues. And I can remember getting they're trying to finish the Silvermane Spider-Man story again, back before you could get these commonly. They had some catalogs and a few other things, but the main thing you could get was at a comic book convention, which for me, I know that there were conventions in the early 80s, big ones, but it was every year, and we would show up there and I would hoard all of these old other comics I had doubles or triples of, and I would try to trade them. Back then you could actually trade comics to some of the dealers that came from a long way, and I brought some cash, like $30, trying to get these issues, mostly to read them. So getting to the comic book conventions, we would take our books with us, and I would of course try to use the methods I discovered previously to press and clean, what we would call pressing and cleaning today, in order to try to trade the books for better books. I wasn't really interested in buying them as much as I was in getting the books I really wanted. I would buy books that I could get multiples of, find one that looked like I could put an eraser on it or stick it under an encyclopedia, and then I would trade it to my friends or to other people at the comic book conventions. And I learned slowly how to do this, while at the same time I was learning how to learning about science. I decided that I wanted to start applying chemistry and math to the cleaning and restoration of comic books. When I went to college, I started to really get jobs and think about things and think about my future in terms of science stuff, but I couldn't stop thinking about comic books and trading them. I was still on my path to getting Spider-Man #1 and Amazing Fantasy 15 and doing the Eternal trades, and that really stuck to my mind. And so then the quest began to get Amazing Spider-Man #1 and Amazing Fantasy 15, and those are interesting stories too. I hope you enjoy it.